Welcome to the How We Are Human podcast, which aims to explore the various ways that we humans know ourselves. My name is Magdalena Smieszek, and this is part 2 of the discussion at the Central European University with Maria Kronfeldner, professor in the philosophy department, and 3 master's students, Olesya Bondarenko, Noha Hendi, and Rachel Sanderoff, who have spent several weeks in the course entitled Topics in the Philosophy of the Human and Social Sciences. We continue our discussion about how the different disciplines of study produce knowledge and contribute to our understanding of the human, whether in a fragmented or a more unified way. Is there a better understanding? The first question, is there a better understanding of ourselves in a biological sense as opposed to a social sense?
No.
No? Okay. No. Okay, good, great. Tell me.
No. I mean, if you, for example, look at today's politics, how the rise of the right wing all over the world, you can see that something is really deeply wrong with how people understand themselves. Definitely this division flavor, which seems a good thing, the specialization, is really problematic right now. And I don't know, maybe universities should re-evaluate their role in the society. Till now, the natural science students are totally away from the social sciences. There is a real problem there, and you need to reevaluate this because we are going somewhere dark, I think.
Well, that's interesting because you all had a very resounding no in response to the question, do we know ourselves better biologically? But based on your answer, you're saying, well, we don't really know ourselves that well socially either. Back to the original point that one can benefit from the other, right? From the biological understanding, more of the social, more of the biological. But you're right, in the public discourse, that doesn't come up. That doesn't come up unless it's in a very harmful way. You know, when it's human beings being medicalized in a way that's dehumanizing. That language gets out there, but
the
it's
language
not.
Of maybe atheists are smarter than religious people, and you can find daily news and studies about this, or that students from non-Western cultures are worse in math and science than students from Western cultures. So this happens all the time, and I just have a problem of saying that the natural sciences should benefit from the social sciences and vice versa, because still there is this dichotomy, there is this distinction between both of them. But how the two can work together on solving a problem is my main concern here, and I don't know how this could be done because I see the way these people work is totally different than social sciences.
Did you want to add? Yeah.
No, I just wanted to say that we might have a feeling that we better know ourselves in biological terms than in social terms because we're bombarded every day by so much information. You know, there's a gene found for this, a gene for that, but much of that information is really junk science. So it does not really translate into any actual knowledge.
It might be good science, but it cannot be replicated, for example. So.
But definitely there is a lack. I mean, nobody even tries to sort of popularize social science, whatever is done in social sciences, and channel that information to people. And I mean, it depends on very many factors. It depends on what the expectations of the readership are, like what people want to read about, what they're interested in, what they're not interested in. Also on the whole way how the whole science communication sphere works and how people write about science and so on and so forth, because very often it tends to sort of favor this kind of a sensationalist approach to giving news. And I mean, with something like a gay gene has been found by scientists, you can create a sensation much more easily than, saying, there are also social studies on this and it's much more complex.
I think one of the reasons why the people still don't talk to each other, why, as Noah said, the two cultures are still with us, is that people don't even agree how. And that's what you indicated, Noah, how knowledge should be produced. What's the value in precision? What's the value in and not saying much, but what you say is very precise. That's what Noah just meant with, I think, with it might be good science, but it might not be replicable. You can't extrapolate to other contexts. It's very limited. It's very modest what the actual scientists do in the lab. But then there seems to be a need for doing more, like having, as Noah said before, the big truth. And then someone steps in and says, yeah, and they're giving us the big truth. And whoa, wait a minute. And that's already, that modesty then gets lost on the way to the public because there's a need for answers. And then there's no education of how science can be digested. They get a critical way of understanding this. And this is a problem that we have since 100 years at least, or longer. And people have tried again and again and again to educate science literacy and to know and to get critical stances on it. And on the social science part, I think it's often the issue that their position then might not be valued. They also want to have big truth. Or and in philosophy often you still have the, let's say, the big truth attitude. In social sciences and humanities, given their own history, they're very modest too, but in a different sense. They have different epistemic values that they cherish, that they like. You need to be very context specific, very, like, historically. You can't give a story from Plato to NATO. There's nothing that is shared between that time and now. So you only can do case studies. So it's a similar kind of like modesty that's then used, but in a it's not just that the interests diverge, but the way how you think precision, simplicity, and these kinds of things work, and then you talk past each other. And I hope at least that by bringing philosophy into the game, which talks about how knowledge is produced, you can understand this talking past each other first step better, and then maybe also kind of create the bridge so that there is more understanding for why the others talk the other way. And you might never directly connect the knowledge produced, but indirectly you will be able to somehow connect it.
Do you think there's any kind of bridge between theological understanding of the human being and the human sciences, the biological or other view of the human?
I think that people can and do try to make those bridges and present them as such, but I do not think that there is. I think that there's a realm of values that are beyond what we can know about.
Because there's a theological understanding, which for a lot of people, that's the main understanding. That's what they think of themselves as human, right? And as we're taking in more of the sciences and the social understanding and the politics, whatnot, all of that kind of blends into one. And this is what we think of ourselves, right? So the big question is there a conception of the human? Or is it something that's constantly being reshaped, as Maria has said, in history? So now we view ourselves in this way. In the future, we will view ourselves in a completely different way, depending on how we make those links between the different kinds of knowledge that we have. Can we get to some concepts of humanity now that we are knowing more and more about human beings from these different points of view?
Well, I have a feeling that we might not really need a unified concept of human for many purposes. And there is, like Maria said, there is so much fragmentation and there is so much inquiry going on from all different aspects that if we try to put it all together in one single account, what a human is, it will just sort of, the concept will collapse under the weight of all that information.
I would add to this that the human race, gender, these kinds of ontological categories that all relate to people, kinds of people and ways of describing people. And the human is the most fundamental that means in the West, have currently. that these concepts are all what political scientists call essentially contested concepts. So you can go on collecting facts about the human from the natural sciences, the social sciences, the humanities, theology, and try to combine these facts, and you will find ways of indirectly relating them to each other and everyone being modest and learning from each other, but there will still be no end, no final answer, nothing like that, because what we think about the human is simply not just only about facts. And it's not only that we select among the facts. I think we have plenty of facts about the human, but then we're gonna choose about what we think is essential about us, and essential in the sense that we believe in that way of being. We want to be that way, and that's a democratic process, right? And a cultural process of making that. And it's a negotiation, it's a contestation, and that's why concepts like that, democracy would be another example from social philosophy or political philosophy. These concepts are essentially contested. That means it's not just that we disagree because we are too stupid to talk to each other. It's part of the game, but it's part of what they mean, that we cannot ever agree because it's always changing, and it's a matter of negotiation, it's a matter of decision what we want to be. And that's how you can combine, because in the beginning there is like human nature as science tells us it is, and human nature as we might want to be, as we envision ourselves. That's how these two concepts of being human come together in one, and then it is on the one hand facts, and on the other hand decisions about which of the facts we think are essential about us. And that decision science won't ever be able, whether social sciences or humanities or natural science, won't ever be able to tell us. That's a democratic process, right?
So now we're in the realm of human rights and the idea of the shared humanity, but at the same time within human rights discourse, there's all these disagreements about how you're actually supposed to treat each other as humans. So we have these ideas, we are all human, we are all socially coming together, and yet we still, in the same way as between the sciences, haven't figured out what is that actually supposed to look like. And I do wonder now that if, there's so much access to so much information that anyone can take bits and pieces and create their own truth about what they are themselves and what everybody else or the other is. If we are trying to bridge these different kinds of knowledge together, now there's so much, it's been so democratized. Is that something that you think can assist in this unity of understanding of the discourses between the values, or is it something that it's creating, let's say, rifts between the kinds of knowledge that we have and that we're producing?
I'm thinking that when you say that we will kind of collect this knowledge and try to see how far we have reached, there is always an aspect that I see absent from the conversation, that this knowledge is impartial because it's born in the West. Even if you don't believe that there is no West and East, but still this is like Western knowledge. It doesn't ask many of the questions that are asked in different countries. It doesn't respond to them. It's in a way, so before thinking about the dissemination of knowledge and being it open access for everybody, you should think that how people will receive this knowledge in different contexts. And if you really want to understand the human one day, you should have multiple versions of knowledge produced all over the world, and this is not happening. And in a way, you can think that this might be impossible, because even if you want to produce knowledge, you're still dominated by the Western paradigm, not in a negative way, but this is a paradigm that has been there for a long time, and it's very successful in a way. But thinking that you should go outside this paradigm and produce your own knowledge, and then you can have this sense of plurality, then you can think of like dissemination of knowledge and open access, because I see how non-Western societies deal with knowledge coming from the West in a very wrong way. There is a language barrier, there's a culture barrier, and when you receive the information, it comes for you already distorted, and you build upon it many conclusions which are totally wrong. So you might put this into the equation.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up it was in my notes, the East and West, because I think about this frequently. Just how are we still divided, East and West? I mean, is it as much as we think we are? This always comes up in human rights discourse. Human rights is a Western concept, and now it's being imposed on different parts of the world. And it's really not true, because part of the understanding of human rights, or the, let's say, essence of human rights, is that what is it that we all shared? And, in the end, these instruments that we have, these international universal laws, were composed by people from different parts of the world, and they're continuously being negotiated, and that information is going back and forth. And I feel like at some point, it's not an Eastern, Western, Northern, Southern discussion. I think sometimes it's useful, but that it's almost contributing to this categorization, in the sense that we're seeing ourselves rather than, more of the shared aspects. It's this constant back and forth between how much are we divided, separate, the subjective points of view, depending of where you're coming from, and how are we unifying, right? Like, that's the constant conflict, coming together and separating.
I think it has been said before that, like, the way we look, the way we see integration and unification among scientific disciplines or different bodies of knowledge kind of reveals also the political model that we believe in. So, like, we can believe in a sort of a democratic, this very, idealized democratic space where everybody has a say and so on and so forth. Or we can have a more realistic model of, ongoing contestation. And I think that's what actually goes on in science. And I think for purposes of stimulating further inquiry, we should not try to unify too much. We should try to have this sort of critical interaction between different bodies of knowledge. And when you said about people from East and West collaborating on human rights issues, I think it's important that it's not just something like an easy consensus or a compromise, but that something is constantly being challenged, being added, and so on and so forth.
So is that the consensus then, that there's the unification is really not a realistic objective?
No, I think what Olesya just said means that there are different ways of creating a whole, right? There is one that equalizes and eliminates all differences, and there is a more complex way of building unities between things that are, or people that are different or disagree. And the visions we have about the kinds of unity, that's a reflection that we should think about, what different ways of connecting and unifying.
We conclude here part 2 of the discussion about topics in the philosophy of the human and social sciences, and I invite you to join us for the conclusion of our talk, where we reflect on politics, economics, religion, and human rights in different parts of the world, and I ask my guests the final burning question. If you were asked, what is a human? What is humanity? How do you answer that question? Personally, not as part of the course.
Egypt, you are asking this question.
Okay, well, there you go. We'll see. That's even.